All right, this is a mixed factoring lesson. And so we've already talked about trinomials, different types of trinomials, difference of squares, grouping, greatest common factor. So all of those techniques, they're going to be mixed in here, and we're going to practice to see if we can identify some things and factor together. Again, we're not going to do multivariable, so we're not going to do number one. But for number two, the first thing you should look for, is there a greatest common factor? Is there a number that goes into 3, 9, and 30? And there is. It's 3. So we're going to factor out a 3 first. Then we're going to divide. And you have m squared plus 3m take away 10. What's inside the parentheses is a trinomial. It's a simple trinomial because there's a 1 in front of the m squared, which means I only need to draw a diamond, and there's no extra steps. So I need to find two numbers that multiply to 10 and subtract the 3. So those two numbers are 5 and 2, and for it to fit, 2 needs to be negative. So 5 times negative 2 is negative 10, and 5 take away 2 is 3. It fits. So then we write down the 3, and then the letter, plus 5, and then the letter again, the variable, and minus 2. Good job. Again, no multivariable. Let's try number 4. So for number 4, there is no common factor here. So there's no number that goes into 4, 7, and 2. They don't all have y's, so we can start right away. I notice it's a trinomial, but it's not simple because the first number is not a 1. So I'm going to draw a diamond, but I'm going to remember to take the first number times the last number. That's negative 8. And then the middle number goes underneath. And we're thinking, what two numbers multiply to 8 and subtract to 7? And so those two numbers are 8 and 1. And 1 needs to be negative. And then you try it. 8 times negative 1. 8 take away 1 is 7. It fits. So we write down the letter plus 8. And the letter subtract 1. And then it's not over yet. We take that leading number, that 4, and we divide both numbers by that 4. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. 1 over 4 is in lowest terms. It doesn't divide. So I take the denominator and I slide it in front, and it's 4y take away 1. And you factored it. All right, number 5. So how am I going to factor it? What, do they have something in common? And they do. 3 goes into both numbers, and the least w is just w. So 3w is the greatest common factor. And then I divide. So 45 divided by 3, and then subtract the exponents. 3 divided by 3, and it's negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1, and then the w's make it 0, so it's just with negative 1. Next one. It's multivariable. Next one. All right, can you see the greatest common factor here? So I'm going to factor out a 4 and an x squared. And then I'm going to divide. So when I divide, 8 divided by 4, negative 4 divided by 4, negative 24 divided by 4, that's what I'm left with. This is not a simple trinomial. The first leading number here is 2. So 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. And the number you don't see with x in the middle is negative 1. I need to find two numbers that multiply to negative 12. And they subtract to negative 1. So those two numbers are negative 4 and 3. They multiply to negative 12, and together they make negative 1. Then I'm going to write that down. So the letter minus 4, and then the letter plus 3. Then I'm going to take that 2, that leading number there, and divide both numbers by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then 3 divided by 2, it's in lowest terms, doesn't divide, so that 2 slips in front, or slides in front. So it's 2x plus 3. Not going to do the multivariable. Number 9. I notice there's nothing they all have in common, and there are 4 terms. So this is going to be grouping. So we look at the first 2, take the least amount of x, and then that's the greatest common factor. Then divide. When you look at the last, we have a negative 5, so that's what I'm going to factor out. When I divide a negative and a negative, it becomes positive. And they share x plus 3, and x squared take away 5 is what's left over. All right, simple diamond. So we have a negative 16 and a negative 6. The first number is 1, so I don't need to do anything like what I did over here. What two numbers multiply to 16 and subtract to 6? So I need to know that's 8 and 2. And for it to fit, 8 is negative and 2 is positive. They multiply to negative 16. They add to negative 6. The letter minus 8, the letter plus 2, and it's done. All right, turn the page. So again, I'm going to take the first times the last. That's 36. And negative 12. I want to find two numbers that multiply to 36 and add to 12. And both numbers need to be negative for it to fit. So it multiplies to 36 and adds to negative 12. The letter minus 6, the letter minus 6. And then I'm going to divide by 9. Now, a couple things I notice here. It's the same factor, so I only have to write it once. And I got to reduce it down. So if I reduce it down, it's 2/3. But I can square it instead of writing it down twice. And then I slide that 3 in front. And there you go. All right, none of these multivariable. Number 15, there's an x that they all have in common. So I'm going to factor out an x. And when I divide, I subtract. So it's x squared, then just x, and then 21. What's left is a simple trinomial. So I need to know two numbers that multiply to 21. And the same two numbers add to 10. Both these numbers need to be negative. So they multiply to 21 and add to negative 10. And then again, it's the letter minus 7, minus 3. And that's it. All right, number 16. Factor out, I think 6 goes in even. It does. So when I divide, it's 1y squared. Now when I divide here, think money, right? How many quarters are in $1.50? It's 6 of them. So this is a quarter. Now, what's left over is called a difference of squares. You square root y squared. It's a subtracting binomial. So we take the square root and square root. So the square root of y squared is y. Square root of 25. What number times itself is 25 is 5. So the answer is I use y and 5 twice. One's adding and one's subtracting. Number 17, no greatest common factor. I have to go 8 times negative 3 and 2, and then find two numbers that multiply to 24 and subtract to 2. So find those two numbers. Take the letter plus 6, the letter minus 4. And then we're going to divide. So divide by 8. These have to be reduced down. So it's 3 over 4 and 1/2. And then you can slide the denominator in front. All right, the greatest common factor is 2. Divide. Oops, that's 70. It's now a simple trinomial. So I need to know two numbers that multiply to 70, and the same two numbers add to 19. So it's 14 and 5. So we have positive 14 and positive 5. All right, no multivariable. When I have a subtracting binomial, I square root each term. So the square root of 100, what number times itself is 100? That's 10. Square root of 9 and y squared. And that leaves me with 10 plus 3y and 10 subtract 3y. All right, no multivariable. 22. The greatest common factor is 3, so I'm going to divide out a 3 to begin with. So everything is being divided by 3. Now inside is not a simple trinomial. I need to go the first number times the last. That's 25 and 10. And it's negative 10. So two numbers that multiply to 25, and the same two numbers add to 10. That's going to be 5 and 5, but both numbers are going to be negative. So I write down -5 and -5. I recognize it's the same factor, so I only need to write it once and square it. And then I take that 25 and I divide both of them by 25. So I need to reduce it down. So that's 1 over 5, and then square it. So divide top and bottom by 5, and then I don't need to write it down twice. I can write it down once and square it. Now slide that denominator in front. And it's done. All right, last one. 23, a simple trinomial. I just need to think what two numbers multiply to 78. Not an obvious one, right? So, and they have to subtract to 7. Let's see. What would be 13 and 6? I think I found it. So 13 times 6 is 78, and they subtract. So it's going to be -13 and 6. So we have -13 and +6, and that's it. All right, Mr. G Math, great job doing the lesson. Till next time.